Good day and greetings from Pretoria, South Africa. My name is Dr. Charles Cotter. I'm the Learning Navigator, the Change Management and Leadership in a Crisis online learning program, part of the e-learning series. This is an on-demand learning program and comprises of 6 modules. Each of the registered learners will receive a SlideShare presentation per module, and then also a detailed workbook which comprises the content, but also a series of learning activities, which I'll expect you to complete at the end of each of these modules. I think this is probably the best way of continuing the engagement and also to stimulate discussion between the Learning Navigator and the registered learners. As a form of introduction, I'd like to give you a quick overview of my professional pedigree. Essentially, I've been in the field of education, training, and development for the last 19 years. Of those 19, 15 as an independent contractor. I've been very privileged to have worked for over 140 different companies, both in the public and private sector. And of course, this stretches across 18 different countries and 4 different continents. My area of subject matter expertise is strategic management, change management, and also strategic human resources management. Just to give you a quick overview of the outcomes of Module 2, we'll be starting off with the change transition cycle. There are 4 distinct stages that I'd like us to navigate through, and then specifically also to look at the management and leadership roles and responsibilities in navigating learners through these different emotional and psychological states to the most advanced stage, which of course is commitment and acceptance of the change. We're also going to look at transformational leadership, in particular contrasting transactional and transformational leadership, looking at the 4 key roles of transformational leaders, and then we'll also conclude Module 2 by looking at a case study, and there are 6 questions that I'd like you to respond to from the case study, which is extracted from the mining sector. Let's start with Module 2. This is the change transition curve. It's a model by Kubler-Ross, and basically suggests that during times of change, in particular during a crisis, there are 4 distinctive stages that employees move through during these phases of change. It does start initially with stage 1, which is shock, and then ultimately denial. And in the workbook 2 that you will receive in conjunction with this video clip, I've given you the detailed emotional characteristics typically of employees. And you'll see on the graph right now, typical of stage 1, this shock and denial is the statement, this won't be happening. This is unlikely to happen. So like we said, employees are typically in denial. Once they've overcome the feelings of shock, they then go into feelings of denial that the change is not real, that it'll blow over, and it's not relevant to their working reality. So of course, this is a very important stage, and you'll see later on with the next slide, I will suggest that information and communication is probably the best strategy that change managers and leaders can employ to navigate people through this very important stage to stage 2, which then of course is resistance. Now this is the most challenging stage, and when we get to Module 3 in particular, we're going to look at the reasons why people resist change, and we're going to look at the managerial techniques that change leaders can use to break down these walls of resistance. But typically, if you see at the bottom of the graph, it's very clear there. The question that employees will ask at this stage is, why should I have to change? So at this point, they've worked through the initial shock and the denial, and now they're at a point where they refuse to accept that change is beneficial to them. So what change leaders need to do is to help them through this very difficult transition, the most difficult stage, and you see the bridge between stage 2 and stage 3, which is the exploration, is of course what we call the depression or despair trough. And this is the rock bottom, so to speak, of change, and this is the most difficult stage. And this is very important for change leaders to be very vigilant, to keep a very close eye on the emotional well-being of the employees. Failing that, they could ultimately regress. And the ideal is that change leaders are able to facilitate a process of transition as seamlessly, as efficiently as possible. Not all employees will adopt and embrace change at the same rate, at the same tempo, but ideally, managers need to create a critical mass in their team where there is this general acceptance to, at least initially, to get to stage 3, which is exploration. When employees are able to work through the resistance to change and they do get to stage 3, you'll see there at the bottom of the transition curve, and this is typically where they will ask the question how this change could work in their favor. So this is where they do some sort of experimentation. So all the defensiveness, which is very typical of stage 2, seems to have disappeared, and they try to attach some sort of meaning to the change. And the moment that they can see that there are benefits of the change to them, that is the fast track towards stage 4, which is then ultimately the adoption, the adaptation, and the commitment. And you'll see typically the question is how the change can work for them. So employees become very pragmatic, and these are often referred to as the waves of change. The bad news for organizations is that these waves of change, which were typically 5 to 7 years historically, have now been compressed to almost 3 to 5 years. And I think during a time of crisis, you have these waves that are almost endless. Every 12 months, every 18 months, you find that organizations need to go through a new transformation, a new transition, a new change process. And it's very important that we are not dismissive of these different emotional and psychological states that employees move through. We need to be vigilant, we need to be mindful, we need to be supportive. And you'll see in the following slide, the Kubler-Ross model, the change curve that we spoke about. There are 3 primary strategies that change leaders need to employ. These are the appropriate leadership actions during a time of crisis. And like I said with the initial stage, the shock and the denial, the most appropriate leadership action during this time of crisis is, of course, to provide as much information and to communicate as openly and as transparently as possible with the employees. As they move through that initial stage and they start transitioning to stage 2, which, as we know, is typified by anger and frustration, resentment sometimes, and ultimately, worst case scenario, a form of depression, emotional support, as it's very clear there, emotional support is a second strategy that has to be employed by change leaders. So employee wellness programs, employee assistance programs, these are paramount to success in helping people to transition from the stage 2 through to the stage 3, which is the exploration, and where they can start eventually seeing the benefits and the practicalities of change. So in order to facilitate this upward climb through experimentation, through the exploration, very important strategy there. The third strategy, of course, is to provide as much guidance and as much direction as possible during this transition. Involve the employees in the decision-making process as much as possible. So I think ongoing consultation, engagement, very important. And ultimately the pinnacle, you'll see the 7th and the most sophisticated stage there, integration. We can only achieve integration if there is a systematic approach towards initially the information and communication, then complemented by the safety net, the emotional support, which is very vital during the most trying and the most testing time during a crisis. And then ultimately enabling this upward trend towards exploration, experimenting with the decisions, and of course, like we said, the guidance and of course the direction is very important. Like we said, the waves of change have been compressed, it's far more compact now, and of course this needs very close attention from managers to make sure that employees are geared and prepared for change. I did mention in module 1 that with the COVID-19 global pandemic, the future fitness, the future proofing of business models has been put into question. And I think this is a very important time where leadership can certainly enhance the future fitness, the resilience, also future proofing of organizational business models and strategies is vital to provide this guidance and direction. So to reinforce the learning, what I would like you to do is to tackle learning activity 3, which just comprises of one question, 3.1. And what I would like you to do is to look at your current organization and to look at what you can do. What are the appropriate leadership actions that you can employ to accelerate and guide employees through the change transition cycle to get to the most sophisticated and mature stage of commitment, stage 4 that we mentioned. So you'll find this detail in workbook 2, and as a form of just formalizing the learning activity, if you could compile a 2 to 3 page essay and email it to me, I would then be able to respond and give you an indication of whether you certainly on the right track. So to summarize, it's going back to the integration of the Kubler-Ross change management model. So it's looking at stage 1, which is shock and denial, stage 2, which is resistance, typical of anger and defensiveness, and then how can you guide your employees through the information, the communication, the emotional support in particular, the transition between stage 2 and stage 3, getting them to start experimenting, start doing the cost-benefit analysis, to look at the merits, the utility value, the practicality of change, how they can become partners and ultimately owners of the change management process. And that, of course, is then facilitated through the direction and guidance that we mentioned. And the moment you talk about direction, essentially, we're talking about the transition, the step up from change management to change leadership. So it's about sharing your vision, it's about articulating the benefits, and of course, applying what we often refer to as WIIFM, what's in it for me. And I think that's a very important message that you need to communicate to employees. If they cannot see the benefits of change, not the organizational benefits, but the individual employee benefits, if they cannot understand and realize the benefits of change, then of course you're not going to get the 100% cooperation and full commitment and support. And that's exactly what you need. You need that critical mass of change. So that's the question that I'd like you to explore. Have a look at your current change management processes. If you find that your organization is in a crisis, at which stage are the majority of your employees currently? Are they at stage 1? Are they still in denial? Are they at stage 2, resistance to change? Are they in stage 3? Are they doing exploration? Are they looking for the benefits of change? Or are they at the pinnacle, at the top of the wave of change? And that's, of course, the adaptation, the commitment, higher stage of maturity. And of course, once they get to that pinnacle, I think the duty then of leadership is to make sure that they are proactive and that they are being prepared, that they are future fit for the next wave of change, which is likely to happen within the next 12 to 18 months.
This is Charles Cotter signing out. I'd like to thank you for watching the video clip, Change Management and Leadership in a Crisis online learning program. Please be on the lookout for subsequent uploads on my YouTube learning channel of the other modules. Also, please have a look at the chat box section. You'll see in the comment section. If you'd like to access a copy of the workbook in PDF format, I'll gladly email that to you for this specific module, but also the other modules of the various video clips. I'd also like to remind you to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Please press the notification bell to be alerted of the subsequent uploads of the other modules, and also like to encourage you to reach out and contact me. My contact details and social media presence will be provided on the screen very shortly, so I'd encourage you to reach out, and of course I would welcome any sort of communication or feedback regarding this video clip or any other learning content on my YouTube learning channel. Thank you. I appreciate your ongoing interest and active social media support. Thank you. You keep well. Bye-bye.